Our next presentation is a panel. It's on building partnerships with First Nations. I'd like to welcome to the stage, please, Ben Ryan from Air North, Michael Hale from NBD, and Jen Byram from Pelly. You want, oh, okay, yeah. Oh, sorry about that. This one is from, yeah. The good news is we built in a little bit of padding in our breaks, so we don't have to cut anyone short, so don't feel like, because we started a bit late, that we're not on target. I'd like to thank this panel for coming to the table. This is something that Sue and I worked very heavily on this agenda for today. This is a great bunch of people, and I think it's a really good wrap-up for the morning session. I would like to be honored if you guys would please each introduce yourself and a bit about your company and your business relationship with First Nations.
Sure, I'll start. I'm Michael Hale. I'm the CEO of Northern Vision Development. We do hotels, restaurants, hotels in communities, and some private seniors care and a few other things, some real estate. We have been around for 20 years and started as 700 and couple investors out of Alberta with about $750,000. Met some folks up here. Today we're 20 years in, enterprise value a little over 150 and 300 employees operating in 5 different communities. And that would not have happened but for what we're here to talk today about. I'm going to start by saying this is not us in any way trying to tell mining companies how to operate their businesses. That is, we know you live in a different world. I used to work for BMC, so I know how hard it can be. It's simply us sharing how we've done it. And maybe there's something in it for mining companies. For us, we are now majority First Nation owned. You start as an Alberta company. We're now majority First Nation owned. 13 of the 14 Yukon First Nations are investors in our company. And the story for us is really 2 pieces. It's equity and it's time. The way we get First Nations to buy into us, they saw us operate for 10 years. They started to believe in what we were doing. We needed to raise capital. They're a ready source of significant capital. And so about exactly 10 years ago, the first major investments came into our company from 3 First Nations, from Ton, Carcross, and TH. TH remains to this day our single largest investor. Ton is number 3, and Carcross is number 4. Since then, 6 of our top 10 are now Yukon First Nations. Almost all of the money that is invested in us is from trusts. So that's investment grade dollars where they have advisors. We do partner with development corps and we partner with First Nations, but the investment dollars are predominantly trusts. That equity and the ability to bring them in as owners has fundamentally altered NVD. It alters how we operate and how we operate in the communities. So if TH, when they came in, the next thing we did a partnership with them in Dawson. So in addition to their investment, everything we own in Dawson is 50-50 with TH Trust. Same thing in Little Salmon Carmacks, same thing in Mayo with NND, same thing in Carcross with CTFN. And what we believe is the reason for the investment, besides the return, which for NVD it's remarkable. You should take a look at it next time there's shares available. But we have the same values. We're here long term. By the time they invested in us, we had already proven that with 10 years in the Yukon. And then what we do is, once they invest in us, it's been 10 years since that first investment. So it's not just that we get their money as equity in their investors and we operate. We change how we operate based on their investment. So how we do things in Dawson is really heavily tied to the expectations of their community and their citizens and the pressure they get in the community. So you have to be open to that. If you're going to take the equity, you've got to be open to adjusting your operations. Right now we have hotels open in Dawson. There is no viable economic reason to do that, but it's a meaningful contribution to the community to have a place to eat and a place to stay. So we sometimes make decisions that are operationally not the best financial decision, but are absolutely a recognition of their equity stake. Any mining company knows that shareholders are the best partners. They own you, they want you to succeed, but they have demands. That's a good thing to understand about when you talk about First Nation investment. It's no different than any other investment. When someone owns that much of you, they get to have an influence over how you operate. So I know we only have half an hour, but you need to be open to the equity if you're going to have the kind of partnerships we have, and you need to be willing to put in the time and over time learn what they want and learn to adapt without ever fully sacrificing the investment grade opportunity, because no one will invest in you if you're not giving them the return that they can get elsewhere in the market. So yeah, equity, time, those are basically how we measure our success, and so far so good.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So I'm Benjamin Ryan, Chief Commercial Officer with Air North Yukon Airline. I'll highlight a few things about our business. So we were founded in 1977 by my dad and co-founder Tom Ace Wood. It was basically a pilot and a mechanic running an airline that largely did serve mining through charters to bush trips and flying fuel drums and that sort of thing. One of the big parts of our business for many years was flying to the remote community of Old Crow, Yukon, home of the Vuntut Gwitchin First Nation. In around 2002, the Vuntut Gwitchin First Nation had settled their land claims with Government of Canada, had a tremendous amount of investment opportunity ahead of them, and decided that investing in the airline was a strategic fit. It was really a recognition that air access is critical to that isolated community. Planes are pretty much a daily thing, and they wanted more say and control, like Michael talked about, understanding the business and figuring out how to make sure it was being handled correctly so that they could have surety of things like food supply and so forth. Things took off in a different direction at that time because their initial investment was part of buying jets, so becoming a jet operator primarily and a turboprop operator somewhat secondarily as time evolved when you look at the total hours and total scale. That was a big step forward for the business, one that couldn't have occurred without Vuntut's investment. But it led to, over time, significant new developments. So one of the other unique features about our business, we're diversified. We have a subsidiary fuel company now called Chieftain Energy, which was created around 2015. That was actually very tied to Vuntut as well. So one of the big jobs that we do is we fly the fuel into Old Crow, which is a significant requirement for diesel power generation, for skidoos and boats, and for home heating fuel. At a certain point with Vuntut, we sort of took a long-term view at the fuel haul is a big expense. It's a big operational thing for us, and we felt that we wanted to control the whole thing. It was rooted in safety, better planning, better budgeting, and so forth. But anyways, Chieftain is a fuel distribution company, and the way we built Chieftain was as a subsidiary in partnership with Kluane First Nation. So that's a limited partnership which involves both Vuntut and Kluane. So we've kind of got into, similar to what Michael was describing, having multiple First Nations involved. Chieftain has also worked, through different arrangements, project specific with First Nations across the Yukon, Northern BC, NWT. Those are probably more similar to a lot of what you see in the mining sector, where it's more project specific partnership arrangements. I'll tie it back to Air North. The big kind of lesson I think that our story has is just around governance and structure. So we've been partnered with Vuntut for over 2 decades. We have 2 First Nation members on our board at all times. We've gone through multiple board members. Vuntut's gone through multiple chiefs, multiple councils, and we've really fine-tuned our governance over time to where I think it's a really big source of strength and inspiration for me personally, and it's a key to our success moving forward. So similar to how Michael described, like there's aligned thinking and collaboration on major issues where when it comes to, for example, how we handled COVID, there was a lot of understanding the community perspective on COVID and what they needed and making sure that our messaging and behavior was really aligned, even though it might not have been as relevant to like our Whitehorse Vancouver flights, for example. So that aligned thinking is a huge asset. I think the board and the citizens test us to think creatively and to think about our business differently. And yeah, I mean, the next thing I would say is just what we've observed is the importance of building young people in the community and sort of the future of what our partnership looks like. So for example, we launched a Toronto service in 2021. We brought a number of community youth to Toronto, and it was really eye-opening seeing young people that had never, seen a big city like that and seeing kind of their impressions. But what's interesting is sort of thinking in the future and thinking about, which of these young people are going to be at the board and shaping the direction of the company. So yeah, I think the big lesson for us is just thinking long term and building infrastructure so we can collectively work better as partners. And we hope to keep doing that for the next 50 years plus.
Great, Ben. I'm Jennifer Byram from Pelly Construction. Pelly Construction is a family-owned business. We've been around since 1987. We started in the basement of our house. We mostly do contract mining, road building, civil earthworks. Our first real partnership with First Nations was actually in Northwest Territories almost 30 years ago. We started a business with a Clecho and an engineering firm called, well, it doesn't matter the engineering firm, but we started a business called Nishikon, and we did some design build road work right outside Rayette. So since then, we've had multiple partners through the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Northern British Columbia. Every partnership is different, unique, and it evolves. We've, our longest partner has been the Van Tut. And just like Ben, we had this partnership start in 2002 with many trips up to Old Crow and going to the special general assemblies, meeting the people. And we decided that together we could start a new business that concentrated on building infrastructure in Old Crow. And we started a business called Porcupine Enterprises. We had that business for, it's ongoing now, but in somewhere around 2018, the management of the Development Corp asked us, we sat down again, and they were ready to take over the business themselves. So we allowed us, we were bought out, and it was cordial. And we still have a partnership with them now, but it's outside of the Old Crow area. When you walk out these doors and you look to the right, you'll see an empty lot in 2 condo buildings, and that is a partnership called River's Edge Partnership, which is with the Van Tut Development Corp as well as Chunakwan. So we are flexible. We have multiple partners. Some are here today, and each relationship is different. I think it builds on what we do with our partners. We run most of our work. We run about 60% First Nation people as employees, and that's what we do. And we're looking forward to more partnerships and when we have projects to build in the Yukon.
Thank you. So within our industry, we like to think we're resilient and adaptable. And for that reason, these are just some of the great companies in Yukon that are family built and First Nation involvement. And I think resilience and adaptability kind of weaved into what you had to say. I had 2 more questions, but I'm going to kind of bring them together because you're touching on them anyways. I'd like you to share with us, if you would, a little bit about your any lessons learned. And I think, like Ben, you led into that, it's coming anyway naturally. But as you can you help weave in for us, which obviously because of this conference, how mining supports and exploration supports your business, or how how it impacts your business.
Ours, hospitality and what we do, you wouldn't think was that tied to mining, but it fundamentally is. And predominantly exploration. Operating mines tend to have on-site accommodations and aren't as reliant on us. Although when they come into town, they spend a lot of money at our restaurants, and that's wonderful. But exploration is a huge part of our business. For those who lived through a nightmare, whatever you were working or wherever you were during COVID, I think we're a small company by Canadian standards, but by Yukon standards, we have some size. And so I can only imagine how hard it was for everyone else. But I was COO at the time when COVID hit, and we went overnight from, we were ready for the Arctic Winter Games, and we were actually meeting in a boardroom to deal with an oversold hotel. We had 110% sold, and we were trying to figure out where to put these people. And then the press release came out, and our hotels went from 110% sold to zero in about 48 hours, took about 48 hours. 2 hotels were shut within 2 weeks, and we were meeting twice a day to work through the cash flow and figure out whether we could pay our bills. And in fact, we couldn't have. We wouldn't have made payroll a couple times, but for Minto and Vic. The only reason MVD is here today is because Minto and Vic, the decision to keep them open and the focus they had on making sure that when they had, because they had to rotate the guys through with those 2-week stays, which was a blessing for us, but they could have done a bunch of things, right? They could have put them in their own camps. They could have isolated them in other places, but they chose to put their people in our hotels, and we assume other people's hotels. And MVD would not exist, would not have made it through COVID without the mining industry, and in particular Vic and Minto at the time. So for us, operating in the Yukon is very much about operating in a Yukon with mining. And without that, this company would not exist. One of the great things about that in this First Nation partnership, we never received pressure. In fact, we never received pressure around the equity stake that these First Nations have and how we conduct ourselves with mining. As long as we are a responsible business operator, they leave us alone to operate, and we have never received pressure around serving mining companies. So I do think it's when you're working with companies that like ours, it's first of all, if you're working with us, you're working with First Nations, and there's no one every First Nation is invested in us. So they see a benefit when you stay with us, but they also know, and we tell them, and we tell everyone all the time that MVD wouldn't exist without Minto and Vic. That's just a fact. So for us, it's had a huge impact. And I think sometimes we get concerned whether some of our First Nation investors are going to have some concerns around our business approach with mining. They don't. They never have. They've never expressed it. They want us to do well, and they want us to serve the community, including mining and exploration. So for us, mining is fundamental to how we operate.
Thank you.
Awesome, Michael. I won't get into COVID because I have the exact same story, 100%. We wouldn't have made it through COVID without mining, but I'll tell an older story of Archer Cathro. Like when we founded Air North in 77, the interest rates were, I believe, 13, 14, 15%. Crazy time in history. Archer Cathro prepaid for a charter heading into one winter at a time that absolutely we wouldn't have made it through winter if that didn't happen. So shout out to those guys and companies like Pelly that have been doing it for a long time, started from very humble beginnings. Still humble, shockingly. There's a lot of great companies in the ecosystem, and they mean a heck of a lot to our business. What I would sort of, I think, focus on more for me is the reality of being a northern community in Canada and sort of thinking about Canada as a whole and where are we going and are we a competitive country and that. And I think what I've noticed with mining is just how impactful the education and the development opportunities are and how critical that is to the north. I was just in Yellowknife on a bit of a tourism mission, which was really interesting. So I went with a company that is owned by Tlicho First Nation. They did a downtown tour, and sure enough, the guide, I used to work in the diamond mines, and I did an aurora viewing thing called backpack tours, and used to work in the diamond mines. Everybody I met, these are First Nation guides, used to work in the diamond mines. And I think it was interesting to get a glimpse into what a fully developed, mature mining sector, multi-years in the modern time, can kind of do for a northern community in terms of people doing other things, but they have this strong foundation of science, of safety, of learning how to be organized, operational planning, all that stuff. So when I think about the future of the Yukon, like our business depends on a healthy Yukon, a healthy economy. Mining is critically important, but just the overall livelihood of the territory is critically important. And I really think it's the foundational training and development opportunities to develop young people that we critically need. And I do sense in my gut that the world's at a weird time right now. It's an interesting time where Canada is deteriorating in terms of competitiveness, and yet we have 90% of people live within 100 miles of the border. We have this huge country, second biggest in the world. 10% of the people inhabit 90% of that country. So, being in Yellowknife, put this in context, they have 33 communities in the NWT, all of which require barging things in or using ice road, huge costs to run that territory, medical and otherwise. And it's like 2 diamond mines are about to close, and it's like, what are the realities of rural Canada, and what are we doing to be competitive? So from that standpoint, I just love meeting, the geologists, the engineers, the people that are young and learning and just going to contribute wherever they are in Canada for years to come. So I think mining's got a huge place in that. And for a business like ours, it's really the only thing I can see that is sort of a cornerstone of having competitive relevance to Canada. I mean, there's other sectors, but when you think about Canada's place in the world, I think it has a place, and I think it has a place here in the Yukon.
Well, we are, depending on the year, we are 90 to 100% of our work is in the mining industry, whether it's reclamation or development or the contract mining. We have the big equipment, we have the bulldozers, the trucks, so we're right on the site. I think what mining gives to companies like myself and the partnerships we have is that it gives us a chance to have long-term contracts. And when you have long-term contracts, you're able to pay off equipment, make acquisitions of equipment, put people through university, and with shorter term contracts what we get with the government, we don't have those opportunities. But we are, for instance, at Red Chris for 6 years. We were at Minto for 22. So at that time, you're able to finance equipment, make our partnership stronger, and train our people.
That's great. So I think, we have a few minutes, we have a bit of time left, so I'll throw out one more question. I think what we were trying to demonstrate was important for us as industry to share with the members of the public, with the Yukoners, with Canadians, with our First Nation partners, is just how interwoven things are. You talked about Minto and Vic, and those opportunities come at a risk. So I'm not here to pretend there's no risk, because we've seen that, and the risk can be pretty devastating. But as we work together and we work to improve and better the way we're doing things, it was really important for us to show the interlink between the industry and some of these great businesses that are family-led, started here, ingrained in relationship in an NVD. So thank you for sharing that. I guess if you have one thing that you could say looking forward that you're looking to in terms of your building your relationship with First Nations, I think that'd be kind of a great way to wrap it up. And then if we have time left, we can take a couple questions.
Sure. I guess, how the mining industry goes, which is something we just have no control over, I guess it has an impact that strolls down into our company that maybe isn't clear. So I was actually on a call. I was almost late today because I was on a call with a bank. We're obviously building a hotel where hopefully all of you will stay a year from now. But we're borrowing a lot of money to do that. So, and the call today was specific about the Vic closure and whether the lender would continue with its loan for the project. They are. But they had a lot of questions for us about mining in the territory. And So when I look at where mining is going, Vic is going to be what it is going to be, same with Minto, then True will be next to the next mine. That's going to happen. But it's the threat of exploration that happens between operating mines, because that's the argument we use when we talk to financiers. It's who we, when we're talking to our investors, we're talking about that, 100, 110. I mean, I lived here when, I think in the early 2000s, the total investment one year was like 10 million in exploration. It was devastating. And so to see exploration dollars is really the thread that keeps mining and its reputation going between the big mining, the big operating mines. And that is where I think the real relationships can be built between the mining sector and First Nations. By the time you have an operating mine, depending on permitting, it can take you a while. So you've established some relationships, you have something going, you can do big deals with them because you have lots of cash flow. It's what you do as exploration companies when you're starting to at that banquet yesterday, seeing what Snowline's been able to do, seeing companies like Sitka, everyone, your company, your industry is adjusting, but I would simply say that it's the exploration companies that are going to define the relationship between mining and First Nations and mining in the rest of the Yukon, because people have got to start to see mining as something other than when a big mine is operating. The bigger benefit almost, other than to government and royalties, the bigger benefit to companies like ours are your exploration activities. See, and that's where you forge the strong relationships with First Nations. So it's those juniors and getting juniors good at this work so that by the time there is an operating mine, the relationships are established. And so whatever can be done to make sure that, there was a comment from Tosh that Sue read out last night, they'll be there when you're ready. So if you're tied to a junior, early on, start treating your First Nation engagement the same way mining companies started adapting to changing environmental rules 10, 15 years ago. It became an early stage part of their work. And I think some of that with First Nations will go a long way, because it's the exploration that keeps mining operating and keeps people positive about mining. It's harder to be positive about a big mine that's in and out of closure. Exploration is where a lot of men and women work. It's how a lot of kids are sent to hockey. So just do the work at that stage, and I think that we can get through the bumps that inevitably are going to happen.
I think that's a really good point, and just because it's right on the tip of my tongue, I'd like to say that one of the things that has come out of the 5-year strategic plan of the Yukon Chamber of Mines, which we worked very collaboratively on and actually had really good interest in, is one of the top things is the communication and education of the general public in the Yukon and differentiating between exploration and mining. So thank you for raising that. It's definitely on our awareness and outreach to First Nations and making sure that people understand that. So appreciate that, hold us accountable. Ben?
Sure, thanks, Laura Lee. I'll go in a slightly different direction. I'll try to keep it concise, but I do want to highlight, it's interesting, Laura Lee and I met when you were with JDS, and we did through Chieftain, we did a deal with JDS Silver at the time in Good Hope Lake area. And I'm sure you would agree with me that sort of just the maturity of First Nations and businesses in forming partnerships has significantly ramped up since then. And I think that's something to talk about in terms of where are we going, what does the future look like? I think we've done a lot of nurturing and developing. At the same time, when I think about companies like Pelly and Air North that have had partnerships for a long, long time and gone through different chiefs, different business cycles, there's more room to go. But one of the big trends to be mindful of is multi-partner First Nation big investments. It's a whole new thing that we're starting to see with energy investments, telecommunications, things like that. And so when I think to the future, I think the future might be a little different here. I know there's talk in Selkirk territory regarding Minto that could involve a different model. So, when I talk about thinking about Canada and mining's role, I probably didn't do a good enough job of talking about what role First Nation play in that, but I see this whole other trend happening where First Nations are thinking bigger, are partnering on a bigger level, and they're forming really good governance behind that. So that's all very exciting, and I think all that to say that I think governance is key. I think having young people understand industry at an early age, get educated, come back, get a variety of work experience, and then be involved at a governance level is a huge part of the key. And I think we've actually been doing a very good job of that. And I think we might reap some benefits from that in the coming decade.
I would 100% agree with you that it is evolving and that they can be very stumbly at the front end. And I honor each and every one of you for spending your decades in being on that journey. We heard from Nations Royalty this morning, which is partnering with Selkirk. The excitement and the possibility of a First Nation owning a mining company is just, it's awesome. Like, it's so cutting edge and really exciting. So, great points.
Well, our success has been tied to when we have mining jobs. We are able to clear our debt and build our company because of mining. And the majority of our partnerships have been in the mining sector when we come to working with First Nations, with the exception of Vuntut, which was different, and Carmax Development Corp. We've been working with them with the Gateway project with building the Carmax, or the Carmax bypass. I think that as we grow as an industry and as we mature, our relationships are maturing, and that we can do bigger and better things together. And I look forward to making more partnerships. And one of the first things we do when we get a project in the Yukon or British Columbia is we sit down with a local First Nation and try to build a relationship. And those, you just don't build a relationship in one day at a conference table. It takes time to get to know each other, get to know who you are, who they are, and meet their community, their people, their elders. And I think we have to kind of change the way we do business and how we've done projects before to open our eyes and be creative of how we can all participate and be successful together.
Can I just say one more thing? So, because I was watching, first of all, I love how you guys do business, and especially what we can learn from that. But I was sitting here thinking, these are three pretty meaningful companies in the Yukon in terms of size and scale and value. And there is enough capital in the First Nation world right now in the Yukon to buy all three companies. Unlevered capital. If they lever their capital and ramp it up into something that is more like how you do an investment, what they could buy with the hundreds of millions of dollars of capital. So as you're thinking about doing this, there are good social reasons to do it, and those are absolutely the right reasons to do it. But there are completely legitimate and very traditional investment reasons to do it. That's where the capital is available for northern projects. It is hard to get people to invest in the north sometimes. It's not hard to get northerners to invest in the north. And I think that when you look at the scale of capital that is out there as a market, it is massive. So if you do well in the community, they will have an interest in your companies. I was just thinking about how much money there is and what they could do for these three pretty big companies for the Yukon. And I think that that's something that should be in every mining company's head. If they're going to operate here, you want local capital. That's meaningful capital. It's committed capital. It's long-term capital. So you do these things both for the good of the project and for the good of the communities you're in, but also because it's what you would do with any capital partner. It's what we do with any investor. Same thing, same approach, just with a local feel.
Okay, thank you. To wrap it up, what I'd like to say that I see here is commitment and collaboration, and we are all intertied. And it's never easy in the beginning, but it's worth sticking it out for these decades to see what the future holds, which looks really exciting. I would also say that everyone up here was exceptionally humble because these three companies, as well as many other businesses, started at a very small level in this territory, not only work with First Nation partnerships, but they give heavily to the community. And so the donations and all of the great things that happen come through this working together. So thank you so much for your time. Please give us a round of applause. Just a quick reminder that Women in Mining is having their AGM at 12:30 in the Longhouse. So if you'd like to grab a lunch and go check into that, please do. And we will see you back here at 1:30 soon. 1:30.